Look, Pierre Poilievre is running a brilliant campaign. We haven't seen conservatives polling this high since Stephen Harper won his majority in 2011. Look at this right here. Harper won 39% of the popular votes in 2011. The conservatives ended up with 166 seats of the available 308 seats. Pierre Poilievre is polling as high as Stephen Harper was in 2011. Some polls even show he is much higher than that. Like, Main Street is the only pollster to give the conservatives a lead at this stage of the race. I bet my conservative friends might start to believe the polls again if more of these polls start to swing in Pierre Poilievre's favor. It is funny how people believe the polls when they show what they want to see, but they call them fake when they don't. It's pretty funny. You know, I was actually curious to see how much correlation these polls have had with election results historically. So I went all the way back to 2011 and compared the final election results to the polling data on the final days before election day. Here's what I found. In 2011, the polls were predicting a win for Stephen Harper's Conservatives. This was the election where he took on Jack Layton and Michael Ignatieff. Really competitive floor. They predicted the NDP would be second and form the official opposition. They also predicted that the Liberals would place third, right? Here's a breakdown of what they thought the popular vote will be. Take Nanos, for example. They're a highly rated pollster. In the final poll, they predicted that the Conservatives would win 37.1% of the popular vote. The NDP, they predicted, would win 31.6%, and the Liberals, 20.5%. Here's how election day turned out. I already told you Stephen Harper won the majority in that election, so no surprises there. But here's where it gets interesting. Harper won 39.62% of the votes. So the polls slightly underestimated him there. To be fair, that's within the margin of error that this polls give you anyways. Jack Layton of the NDP won 30.63% of the votes. Also pretty close to his expected performance based on what the polls were showing before the election. Michael Ignatieff got 18.91% of the popular vote. So he underperformed by close to 2%. Again, within the margin of error. So I'll say the polls on the final days before the 2011 elections predicted the final result pretty accurately. But what about 2015? This was the election that gave Justin Trudeau his only majority. He beat Stephen Harper. Tom Mulcair was the NDP leader for this election. Going in, there was no doubts the Liberals would win. Every poll had them ahead. And just look at Nanos here, right? One day before the election day, Liberals were expected to win the popular vote by 9%. Guess what? They won by 8%. Again, within the margin of error. Here's where it gets tricky because now we're hitting 2019 and 2021. These were the elections in which Justin Trudeau won his minority governments. In 2019, he was going up against Andrew Scheer. He was also going up against Yves-François Blanchet and Jagmeet Singh. Here's what the polls look like coming into election day. You can already see here, it is slightly different from the first two polls I showed you, yeah? There's no red or blue wave. There's nobody dominating here, right? Well, most of the polls were pretty close. Most of them had Trudeau winning, but Andrew Scheer was close in most of those, right? Nanos, in this case, predicted Andrew Scheer would get 32.5% of the popular votes. The Liberals were expected to get 31.7% of the popular votes, right? This was basically a dead heat, really, right? And they were not wrong. They were not wrong. Andrew Scheer did win the popular vote. Unfortunately, he lost the election because, as you know, the popular vote doesn't make you prime minister in Canada. The seats the party wins make you the prime minister. Justin Trudeau's victory here hinged on having a strong showing in the Atlantic provinces, in central Canada, and in Vancouver. That was the ball game. So the polls were right again. Let's do 2021, right? The COVID election. This time, the Conservative candidate was Erin O'Toole. Most of the other candidates were basically the same people contesting today. Again, the polls showed this mix. There was no red or blue wave. Here you see the polls basically showing a dead heat between the Conservatives and the Liberals. Nanos was giving the Liberals a slight advantage in the popular vote. Erin O'Toole ended up winning the popular vote as Andrew Scheer did before him. But the Conservatives, again, did not win enough seats to form government. And it was essentially a similar story. Atlantic Canada, Central Canada, and Vancouver. In the 2021 election, and in the last three elections I showed you, the polls on the final days before the election were right. They were pretty close to how the results ended up turning out. And that, my friends, is why this debate week is so very important. Today, Pierre Poilievre sits at 38%, and Mark Carney sits at 43%, according to 338 Canada's aggregate polls. To be fair, Pierre Poilievre's 38% has been enough to form majority governments in the past. That's not that far away to what Stephen Harper had in 2011. Unfortunately for him, Mark Carney has 43%. And what those numbers suggest is that if the election was today, Mark Carney would coast to a majority. So Pierre Poilievre needs to put on a show this week if he wants to turn this around. And I think he's set up very nicely to do just that. Look at this right here, okay? The Leaders Debate Commission announced the themes for the French and English debates. In the French debates, they will be discussing cost of living, energy and climate, the trade war, identity and sovereignty, and immigration and foreign affairs. In the English debate, it will be affordability and cost of living, energy and climate, leading in a crisis, public safety and security, and tariffs and threats to Canada. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. All things that we can get our teeth into. Based on where Canadians are right now, I think Pierre Poilievre wins on cost of living. People still blame the Liberals for their handling of the economy in the last 9 years. Even Mark Carney has admitted it wasn't a priority for the Trudeau government compared to how it will be for his government. On energy and climate, I don't think climate change is top of mind like it used to be. Today, there's more openness to oil and gas exploration with very little guardrails. That's just the pulse of what I can detect, right? Pierre Poilievre probably wins that because people probably trust Poilievre to follow through. Mark Carney has to walk this fine line between being the net zero guy at his core and developing oil and gas. That's not an easy line to walk. On the trade war and on Canadian sovereignty, I would say these are Mark Carney's strongest themes. Already, he has managed to get Trump to stop calling Canada the 51st state. Trump clearly respects him, and that's a win. Sure, we have tariffs on automobiles and on aluminum and steel today, but really, you can't blame Mark Carney for that. So I think if the ballot question is Trump and Canada's sovereignty, I think Mark Carney wins that all day long. He wins that all day long. And that's why you see the Liberals trying to push that narrative. On immigration and foreign affairs, I think that one's probably a toss-up. The real differentiator is the fact that Poilievre wants to cut foreign aid and Mark Carney wants to keep foreign aid going. I think these days most people might side with Poilievre on that topic. So here's the lowdown. Poilievre is probably favored on 3 of the 5 themes that will be discussed in the debates. The big problem is the 3 he wins on do not include the 2 topics that may define this election: Trump's trade war and Canadian sovereignty. Here's where I think the debate format might really favor Pierre Poilievre, though. Let me read you something real quick. The Leaders Debate Commission, which is organizing the face-offs, says the debates are going to have a simple and flexible format that favors a natural flow and open exchanges between the leaders. Take note of that. There will be open exchanges between the leaders. I think Pierre Poilievre is picking up the phone right now because someone just rang his number. Someone just rang his number. Listen to this next part, okay? It says, the commission adds that the debates are going to feature several themes, and within them are a number of questions that would provide leaders an opportunity for a substantive discussion on policy issues and their platforms. So the questions would provide an opportunity for discussion on policy issues and the opposing platforms. Again, this might favor Pierre Poilievre very much because you just know he is preparing to sling all the mud. Any inconsistencies he can find in Mark Carney's positions, you just know he's going to be calling that out, right? Any holes whatsoever, you will see him go on the attack. No question about it. The question I'd like to see Mark Carney answer is if he is capable of standing up to some scrutiny. He quite often acts like somebody with something to hide when he's under scrutiny. The media has not been as nice to him as the Conservatives would like you to believe. But I think Pierre Poilievre has an opportunity to rough him up a little bit, right? The rules allow Pierre Poilievre to do that. And if Pierre can really poke a hole in Mark Carney's credibility in this debate week, we could see that gap between the Conservatives and the Liberals close up quite a bit. And then it will be about who shows up come election day. Here's what Mark Carney must not do. He has been caught talking on both sides of his mouth at times. He needs to get his story straight. He needs to get his story straight. And he needs to keep the language relatable. He has this way of talking about stuff that usually comes off a bit too high level sometimes. Like when he talks about the economy, for example, the economy almost always seems like this abstract term. But he needs to bring that down to how does that affect people's bottom line? Right? That's what I want to hear. Also, he's the guy that all the other candidates will be going after in these debates. Look, they all dislike Pierre Poilievre. Jagmeet Singh probably will never forgive Pierre Poilievre. Like, Pierre Poilievre violated him heavy when he was trying to force an election. But Pierre Poilievre is not taking votes from the NDP and the bloc like McCartney is, right? He's winning a lot in Western Canada. Those are probably firm for Pierre Poilievre. But the NDP is facing the possibility of losing party status. Like there's talk that Jagmeet Singh might lose his seat in Burnaby South, right? The bloc is losing their grip on Quebec. So those two are areas where Marconi has been making gains. So you can expect you, Francois Blanchet, at the very least, to go after Marconi for sure. I've already seen some attack ads from the NDP on Marconi. I think Marconi is really the hunted here. I think everybody's going to put their jabs in on Marconi. So it will be interesting to see how Marconi handles that, because this is the ball game right here. If he comes out of these debates in the same condition as he's going in, by that I mean as a flawed candidate with some upside in all the places that matter the most today, then he's laughing. He is laughing. Speaking of the debates though, I'm hosting a watch party on Thursday. I'll be watching the English debate on April 17th. It will be live on my YouTube channel, and you guys can join the party. If you're watching this video on TikTok, you can find a link to my YouTube channel in my bio. We'll have a live chat going, and you can have your say on the fly. You guys who watch the channel know I'm pretty fair to both sides. I critique both sides. I'd like for you guys to join me on Thursday. I'll be live at 3:45 p.m. Pacific time, 15 minutes before it all kicks off. That's 6:45 if you're in Ontario. So subscribe to the channel right now. That way you don't miss the notification when I'm live. I'll see you there, guys. Take care.